If you are going to hire some salespeople, chances are you're bringing in some of the Gen Z demographic into your organization. They're digital natives, fast learners, and highly value driven. But they also think differently about work, communication, leadership, and growth. So, how do you successfully onboard Gen Z sales professionals in a way that sets them up for confidence, productivity, and long term success? Well, to guide us, I'm pleased to welcome back a regular guest, Troy Harrison. Troy and I have something in common. Neither one of us are Gen Z.
Truth.
Troy, great to have you back.
Good to see you again, Jeff. It's always a pleasure.
I like this topic, the Gen Z. We have studied these generations many times. I think the millennials are the most studied of all because I remember back in the day, we talked about them all the time. I don't hear so much about Gen Z, but here we are.
Well, and that's Gen Z right now is in the 18 to 28 cohort.
Hmm.
So they're still on the younger edge of the workforce. And a lot of them still are either they are or they about to be what I call just outs, which is just out of school, just out of college.
Okay.
And one of the issues that I see is that, particularly in a sales role, bringing Gen Z on, onboarding them and ramping up success is a little bit different than what we did with particularly with Gen X and even with the millennials. And I think we're at a junction point where we can either be the old guys bitching and saying, get off my lawn, or we can figure out how to do this right because Gen Z obviously isn't going away. And this plays into a lot of the generational dynamics and sales that I've been talking about. The two most important issues in sales are the aging sales force. And I've said this before, the B2B sales, the average B2B salesperson in the United States right now is 47.2 years old. 15 years ago, that was 42. So the profession itself has aged 5 years in the last 15. We've got to bring in new blood. And there are a lot of reasons for that. And I think I've discussed that with you in a different video. So I'm not going to go into that right now. But let's talk about how to take those just outs, those Gen Zers that are working their first sales job, or hell, maybe even their second. They might be coming off of a less than positive experience. And let's talk about what it takes to bring them up to success. First thing we got to realize is that Gen Z, as you said, they're incredibly tech savvy. They're incredibly interconnected. Gen Zers have friends all over the globe. Granted, they're people they've never met in real life, but they understand networking. Okay. With you cannot be a participant in social media and not understand networking. They tend to understand networking at a very deep and specific level. We can capitalize on that. The thing that it takes to onboard Gen Z, structure. Lots and lots of structure. You got to understand, you and I, Jeff, when we were kids, our mom said, go out and play and be home for dinner, right? Gen Z has play dates. Everything is structured with these kids. And I'm not trying to put anybody down here. I'm just stating a fact. Everything is structured and programmed. They've got school from this time to this time, and then they got volleyball practice at this time, and then they got this other thing at this time, and they're living off of a calendar as much as we are, because they've got a structure for every day, and then they move into a sales role, and a lot of sales managers and business owners, they want to take them, sit them down at a desk and say, okay, here's your desk, here's your phone, here's your book. Good luck, you're on your own. And you can't get away with that with Gen Z. You have to create a structure for them to learn your business because they want to learn. Like you said, they want to learn, they want to be trained, they want to understand how to sell. But they're not going to pick it up by osmosis because, again, very structured, very programmed all their lives. And so you have to have a structure that onboards them. And I always recommend, even with whatever generation, I recommend that the first 4 weeks be nothing but learning. Learn the business, learn how to sell, learn how you want them to sell, and have that programmed out. And then the second week or the second month, when you get them into the field, it's not just enough to say, okay, I want you to start having 5 appointments per week. You've got to start them out programming them in and saying, okay, you come in at 8 o'clock. From 8 o'clock to 8:30, I want you to work your LinkedIn. And then from 8:30 to 10:30, I'm going to have a prospecting list for you. And we're going to role play. And I'm going to teach you how to create a prospecting talk track. And I want you to prospect from 8:30 to 10:30. Early on, you literally have to program them out almost hour by hour, because that's what, and that doesn't mean you've got to babysit them for the rest of their lives or for the rest of their careers. Over the fullness of time, and when I say the fullness of time, 3 to 6 months, you can pull that back. They'll start to find their feet. They'll start to get their wings on their own and get it figured out. But in the early stages, and this is a generational characteristic that I see, Gen Z, and I think it's because of the way that they've been socialized and taught. Gen Z is very apprehensive when they're dunked into a new activity that they really don't know much about. So you do have to program them out and show them what those ideal days look like, show them what those ideal weeks look like. And early on, you've got to kind of keep monitoring and holding accountable for that. And a lot of people that are watching this video right now are sitting there going, why in the hell would I want to do all that? Well, why you'd want to do all that is that these kids are intellectually curious. Intellectually curious people ask lots of questions. What's the best skill in selling? Asking questions. 80% of your chance to win or lose a sale is determined by the questions you ask. They actually tend to be fairly charismatic in person, at least the ones that I've been around. They tend to be good communicators, and because they like to learn, once you show them the path and give them the tools, a lot of times their actual learning curve from dead zero to being able to make productive sales calls, it might even be quicker than past generations. So the upside potential is there. Now, and I actually had this meeting with a client of mine last week when I laid out a plan, a full 9-point plan for onboarding their cohort of Gen Z salespeople. And they're kind of sitting there going, wow, that's a lot of work. And I looked at the president, and I've known the president since he was not a rookie salesperson, but a fairly new salesperson. I said, all right, let me ask you something. If you had come into your first sales job and your manager had had this kind of structure laid out, what would it have done for you? And he just kind of stopped. I said, no, seriously. Picture yourself in that kind of an environment where the company is investing that much in teaching you what your job is all about. He said, okay, honestly, I'd have ramped up quicker. I said, yeah, me too. I would have. I absolutely, whatever I accomplished in 6 months, I would have accomplished in 3 this way. And so to bring it full circle, when you build an onboarding and acculturation program for Gen Z salespeople, apply it to all of your new hires, whether they're Gen Z or not, because they will be more successful that way. But I think what Gen Z is doing, not on purpose, but I think the effect of this is going to be a lot of companies are going to have to get their act together a lot better with respect to bringing on salespeople, because I'm seeing a lot of companies fail right now in the marketplace with this because they're trying to onboard Gen Z the old ways, and they're going, wow, it was good enough for me. It ought to be good enough for them too. It's not about what's good enough for them. It's good enough what's good enough for your company. So, yeah, I think that there are a lot of things that the generational aspects are doing to sales right now, but a lot of them are forcing us to get our act together in a lot of different ways, both customer facing and internally. I think that's a good thing. So, yeah, if I had to sum it up in a word, that word would be structure.
Can you get them to work at 8 in the morning?
Yeah, they do.
I mean, younger
Yeah,
people like to sleep in.
I like to sleep in.
Oh, come on, Troy. you're up at 5 a.m.
Ha! I don't like to know that 5 o'clock comes twice a day, dude. What kind of mutant are you?
Hey, you
Um,
mentioned you mentioned that they are good at networking. That's got to be a great sales.
oh, it's huge. It's huge. A lot of these kids come into the sales profession with a built-in network of people all over the country or even all over the world. And more than that, they understand how to connect with people. And they have connected with these people without the immediate expectation of a return on investment. Here's
Patient.
the impact of that. We've talked about LinkedIn before, and I said the worst thing you can do on LinkedIn is immediately hit somebody with a pitch slap.
We've
You
talked
connect
about
with
that. Mhm.
somebody, and then there's just the immediate pitch slap. And I know we've done a video on this. Gen Z intellectually would reject that approach. Now, you can channel Gen Z to slow play LinkedIn prospecting, which is the right way to do it. But it's not as, it's more instinctive to them to slow play those relationships, which is a good thing. And I've, and here's all the get off my lawn stuff. Oh, can you get them to work on time? Yeah, yeah, you can. Can you get them to prospect? Yeah, huh? They will. And if they understand the process, they'll do it really well. And here's another thing. Gen Z is probably a lot more why intensive. What I mean by that is you've got to explain the why we do things to them. Whether it seems and they're not going to buy into because that's the way we've always done it. Again, not a bad thing. Maybe that forces you to re-examine some of the things you've done that maybe aren't as efficient as they used to be. And it's okay to tell Gen Z, we do this because we make more money if we do this. They'll dig that. They'll understand it. But you should expect more questions that begin with the word why from Gen Z. And I don't think that's a bad thing because they're going to be asking your customers the same types of questions.
So, Troy, I have heard it's been said that this Gen Z crowd, this group of great young people, value purpose,
Hmm.
flexibility, transparency. I've never worked in sales like you have, but what you do is commission based usually. How does
Hmm.
that fit into our conversation? A commission driven work culture.
See, here's the thing. Gen Z doesn't reject commissions. They like commissions. They like to get paid. They like to make money as much as the next person. However, they do like to feel like they're doing something good for somebody. So hopefully, everybody watching this has a way to articulate to customers why they are better for doing business with you. How are you helping them achieve their business goals? Well, that's the same kind of sales pitch you need to give your Gen Z salespeople because that is the purpose behind the work, and they'll buy into it. So, does that answer your question? That the
Yeah.
purpose and commissions don't work at cross purposes. Look, one of my, there's a phrase going around now that isn't bad. It's know your why. It's one of those things that's all of a sudden got real trendy over the last year.
Hmm.
Part of my why, whether I was self-employed as a coach like I am right now, or whether I was selling for other people, I wanted to help people. I Sales was my tool for helping people be better, for improving people's situations. So that's part of my why. I never turned down a commission check in my life. Okay, but most of us like most of us like to have some sort of a purpose behind our work. It's just more prominent with Gen Z, and I definitely think it's more talked about with Gen Z.
Yeah. I'm back in the day working in a factory or doing repetitive work was okay. I'm not sensing it is with the younger generation today, but in sales, you have all kinds of ways of approaching it, the networking. the negotiations, and of course the paycheck. So times are changing.
They are, and you brought up something about factory work, and we're getting a little outside my lane, but I'm going
Mhm.
to go there because factory workers, Gen Z factory workers will buy into the company mission. In other words, if the company mission is, you know, we help our customers market themselves better through the purchase of our products, and you help make those products so you participate in that, Gen Z will buy into it. So the purpose doesn't have to limit itself to sales or customer contact. You can make that throughout your business, and you should. You know that the things that we're talking about as far as the purpose, those are things that really should be part and parcel of what companies are doing already. A lot of times they're not, but
Yeah.
they should be.
And we can't pigeonhole everyone in exactly the same way. Everyone,
Not at all.
you could be a Gen Zer and act like a millennial. Who knows? Sure.
I've seen Gen Zers that act like boomers. So yeah, which you do want to approach people on. You still want to meet people on their level as individuals.
You do.
But this bringing Gen Z into sales is an issue that is not going to go away, Jeff. It's not. And there are many, many jobs right now that are at some level of risk of being lost to AI and technology. I think that number is a fraction of what people are talking about. But sales is a skill that really I don't think is going to go away. I think, and by the way, when you talk about things like AI and CRM and video conferencing and LinkedIn to Gen Z, yeah, they're on board. They already get it. They have a When it comes to AI, they have a healthy level of skepticism. We've talked about that before, but you're not going to get a lot of pushback on why they should use it. So, there are companies out there that have outstanding teams that have a high Gen Z cohort in them. They're just
All
not
right.
talked about nearly enough.
Yeah. Well, here we are. We talked about it. Hopefully, those watching will take away some great tips
I
because this
hope
is
so.
an important workforce that takes maybe a special approach.
Yeah, unless you're planning on shutting down your business in the next 5 years or so, you're going to have to deal with this. So you might as well get on board now.